Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books, and a few weeks ago I did a video of Edwardian works available on Project Gutenberg. I did say at the time I nearly had enough for 2 lists of 50, but not quite. I've finished that list, and some people did point out some significant writers I'd missed out from the original list, so this is not too much of an exercise in barrel scraping. There are some big names here. The only concession I'm making in this list is for a couple of titles I've stretched the date definition of Edwardian, but mostly where we are looking at autobiographies of people talking about their activities in the Edwardian period. So I think I'm almost in the clear. I am going to start with one of the writers it was pointed out I had omitted. H. Munro, better known as Saki, is a short story writer, and the work I've chosen is Reginald, which is a collection of short stories about the same character. I'm going to follow that up with a clutch of adventure stories. Prester John by John Buchan is the story of Prester John, of which more later this coming year I am hoping. Raphael Sabatini, one of his earlier works, Bardley's the Magnificent. Henry de Vere Stackpool with The Blue Lagoon. Yes, the Blue Lagoon novel was written a full 58 years before Brooke Shields was even born, and Percy James Brebner and Princess Maritza. Children's books can get a little bit of adventure too, certainly in this first one. Of the 3 children's literature picks here, we start with F.S. Brereton and The Great Airship. F.S. Brereton wrote a lot of gung-ho stories for boys, most of which on first inspection I don't think would pass the sniff test for suggesting as a recommendation. It's usually about us Imperial English stomping around the globe subjugating people. Frances Hodgson Burnett, her best known works don't fit in the Edwardian time frame, but A Little Princess does. But just in case you thought children's literature was all going to be escapist, don't worry, there is a introduction or a primer for students of literature from H.E. Marshall with English Literature for Boys and Girls. I'll follow that up with a comedy called The Brass Bottle, which I think is some sort of involves a genie, and this is written by a writer who went under the name F. Antsy. I don't know if they just wanted their name to be fancy, but F. Antsy. We've still got some Edwardian mysteries and crime thrillers to go through. Edgar Wallace, who I think inexplicably I left off the last list. I've chosen Angel Esquire. A.C. Fox Davies was an expert in heraldry, and in fact, if you go on to Gutenberg, other than this book I'm recommending, the other works available from him are all on heraldry. He was an authority on the subject, but I'm going with his mystery novel, The Duplicate Death. And I can't believe I left this one off the last list. I'm not entirely sure I did. I'll repeat it here anyway. Erskine Childers and The Riddle of the Sands, an espionage book. A little bit too late this year for Dr. November, but maybe one to download to your Kindle. Other devices are available for next year. Slightly linked to espionage and skullduggery, a subject that was gaining more precedence in the Edwardian era was warnings of invasion, and basically prophesying a war between England and Germany, which obviously came to pass. In the last video, I think I suggested The Invasion of 1910 by William the Q. Here we have A.J. Dawson's The Message. An invasion, or at least an attack from the continent, is one of the subjects of The Raid on Dover by Douglas Moray Ford, one of the 3 science fiction picks from this list. And it's not really it's not written in the same vein as the other invasion literature. Ford has other things he's working through here, and one of his ideas in this science fiction future he's created is that women are in charge, of which more shortly. But to finish the other science fiction picks, I've chosen G.K. Chesterton with The Napoleon of Notting Hill, and Rudyard Kipling with the Night Mail. And these next 4 works are where I have allowed myself a little bit of give with the dates. It's about the women's suffrage movement, suffragists, suffragettes, and just people involved in the campaigns. These works are typically written after the event, looking back on the times and what happened. There's a little bit of revisionism and hagiography in there, but they're still very enlightening texts. Starting with Sylvia Pankhurst. We probably have to start with a Pankhurst, and this is the history of the women's militant suffrage movement. The next work is Prisons and Prisoners by Constance Lytton. She is related to Edward Bulwer Lytton. She is of high birth, as many prominent suffragists and some suffragettes were. However, she would disguise herself and was imprisoned and charged under her pseudonym of Jane Wharton, because the authorities would never have treated an important woman like Constance Lytton as they treated the working class Jane Wharton. And suffice to say, she was not treated very well. In fact, she was treated so badly that her health after her imprisonment never improved. She wrote this work whilst she was, I'd say, in convalescence, but convalescence implied that she got better. But she was still keeping the pretense of the pseudonym up. If you look at the text on Gutenberg, this is written by Constance Lytton and Jane Wharton. We have Millicent Fawcett and Women's Suffrage, a short history of a great movement. And finally, we have Cicely Hamilton. Cicely Hamilton wrote the women's suffrage anthem and a fair number of plays. Unfortunately, none of those are on Gutenberg. What we do have is Marriage as a Trade. This is more of a polemic, non-fiction. The only Cicely Hamilton I've read is something that I read earlier this year, and that was her science fiction novel Theodore Savage, which I really enjoyed. I'm interested to learn more about this woman. She was very involved with politics, obviously, very involved in the suffrage movement, as well as being a writer and an activist. She was also an actress. She was in a number of George Bernard Shaw's plays, and as well as all of that, she also turns up as a fictional character, or fictionalized character, in E.M. Delafield's The Diary of a Provincial Lady. Just in case you got carried away and thought that all women in Edwardian England would be for women's suffrage, there was also an anti-suffrage movement And one of the main proponents of that movement was Mary Augusta Ward. So, for the sake of balance, I've included one of her works here from the Edwardian age, and this is The Marriage of William Ashe. And moving now into literary fiction. So nothing, no specific genre attached to these, but some famous names. Arnold Bennett and Anna of the Five Towns. John Galsworthy with The Island Pharisees. Hall Caine with The Eternal City. Rhoda Broughton with Lavinia. George Moore and The Untilled Field. We have Arthur Morrison and The Hole in the Wall. We have Emily Post and The Title Market. Now, Emily Post, I think, is American. I'll put her in here, though. She was much better known as an etiquette expert. And I think, as well as this novel, The Title Market, being available on Gutenberg, her guide to etiquette is also there. We may have to dip into that in a future video. We have Henry Brocken by Walter Delamere. We have The Malefactor by E. Phillips Oppenheim. And we have a W. Somerset Maugham book about the occult called The Magician. A couple of comedies now. We have Ian Hay and A Man's Man, which is sort of a satire on student life. And we have Elizabeth von Arnim, The Benefactress. She was German but spent much of her time in England and raised children in England. In fact, the children she raised had tutors who included Ian Forster and Hugh Walpole. It was the Edwardian age in Australia too, and we have Miles Franklin here and My Brilliant Career. Miles Franklin, the pen name of Stella Maria Sarah Miles Franklin. A clutch of historicals and romances now. We have Marjorie Bowen with The Viper of Milan. We have Florence Barclay with The Wheels of Time, which is just one book and not 15 massive books, thankfully. A Woman's Soul by Charles Garvice, who mostly wrote under the pseudonym Caroline Hart. John Oxenham and Pearl of Pearl Island. A historical romance with Geoffrey Farnell and My Lady Caprice. And we have Robert Hitchens and Bella Donna. I see what he did there. And to round off this list, a collection of different types of writing. The first is a diary or a book about the natural world, very popular for some reason in Japan, and that is George Gissing with The Private Papers of Henry Rycroft. We have a play with J.M. Synge's The Playboy of the Western World. We have some poetry with James Joyce and chamber music. We have some socio-economic historical work with Charles Masterman's The Condition of England. Now, Masterman was an MP. I think he was a radical liberal MP, and I think this work was quite influential at the time. So I've chosen poetry from someone not known primarily for their poetry, and I've chosen a poet but not chosen a collection of his poetry, W.B. Yeats, and a work on mysticism and spirituality. This is The Tables of the Law and the Adoration of the Magi. Now this came out in the Edwardian era, but I think it was a private pressing, only a couple of hundred copies, obviously since reprinted. And where we find spiritualism and mysticism in the Edwardian age, Theosophy won't be far behind, and here we have Thought Forms by Annie Besant. Two pieces of travel writing. We have Mona Caird and Romantic Cities of Provence. and Lillian Bell, and more humorous travel writing, Abroad with the Jimmies. I'm going to end this list. This has been a quick 50 with Ian McLaren and Books and Bookmen. This is a reflection on the book industry in the Edwardian period and late Victorian period. And I think it comes out in 1911 or 1912, so just after the Edwardian era, but referring directly to it. 50 works from this video, 50 works from the previous one. That is a round 100 pieces that you can get from Gutenberg, all from this one decade, 1901 to 1910, and stretching it a little bit on the other side. So much stuff came out in the Edwardian era. I'm sure clever historians will tell you exactly why that is. This is, releasing the empire from the shackles of Victorianism, end of the Victorian era, but also the fin de siècle, the moving into the 20th century, and a brief moment when a lot of things seemed possible until the world falls apart. There were so many other writers where I thought, this sounds brilliant, this is right up the street, this is what I want to talk about. I go to Gutenberg and they're not there. Gutenberg is not omniscient yet, but there is an awful lot there, and I should imagine there is an awful lot more that I've missed even in creating these two lists. It is still not too late at this point in December to ask Father Christmas for an e-reader. If you're taking part in the Read What You Own challenge and you've allowed yourself to download free ebooks as one of your get out clauses, then there is material here for, I should imagine, at least 3 or 4 upcoming BookTube events. Unfortunately for my part, anything that I hadn't downloaded before November the 6th doesn't count. I can still download it, I can still read it, it won't count towards my 100 books. Anyway, until next time.